Everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's information series workshop. This is one of 6 workshops from October until April. These sessions are hosted by the Manitoba FASD Coalition and the Manitoba FASD Family Network. My name is Laura Bennett. I'm with the Manitoba FASD Center and Family Network, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that the Manitoba FASD Coalition gathers and works on the treaty land of the Manitoba, traditional territories of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Assiniboine, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming a wonderful panel of speakers from the CanFASD Research Network and the CanFASD Adult FASD Expert Collaboration Team, who are here to share about strengths-based research with adults with FASD and their caregivers. To make the best use of our short time together, I'm not going to talk for long. Rather than doing formal introductions, the speaker bios were circulated by email, and I'll be inviting our speakers to introduce themselves to you in just a short moment. Before I do that, I just have a couple quick housekeeping items. One is we will be keeping track of questions throughout the session. So if you do have a question during the presentation, please feel free to type it into the chat box. We're going to be keeping an eye on that. And during the question period at the end of the session, we'll make sure that your questions are addressed at that time. And for the sake of ensuring a strong internet connection, we just ask that everyone please turn off your cameras and your microphones so that we have the best connectivity possible for our speakers. And with that, I will turn things over to Dorothy Reid, who I think is our first speaker to start things off.
Have to remember to unmute. Thank you very much. I just want to say thank you for inviting us to speak about this important area. Katy is going to be sharing the slides with you. We entitled this Balancing the Story of FASD Through Strengths-Based Research. Just wanted to begin by acknowledging that we are on a variety of different traditional lands and are truly grateful for the ability to love, laugh, learn, and live on these beautiful lands. First of all, who are we? Well, my name is Dorothy Reid, and I'm on the Family Advisory Committee for CanFASD Research Network. My husband and I adopted 2 boys with FASD, and that started our journey into trying to learn how to provide, advocate for supports and services for individuals with FASD. Katy, Lauren, do you want to introduce yourselves?
Yes, I can't see Lauren's face. Lauren, do you want to go?
Hi everyone, my name is Lauren. I am an individual who is living with fetal alcohol syndrome. I was diagnosed in 2014 with having this condition at the age of 27. Since then, I've become an advocate for this, and by using my strengths, I have succeeded.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks,
Katy?
Lauren. Yeah, my name is Katy Flanigan. I am a research associate with the CanFASD Research Network. I've been working with the network for maybe about 6 or so years now, and I have the pleasure of working with such a wonderful team of experts. I'm also a psychologist in Edmonton, and I'm a mom of 2 boys who are homesick today, so I will apologize in advance if they photobomb our Zoom meeting, but that's me. I'm really happy to be here and appreciate the invitation.
Our other presenter is Niall Schofield, and he's actually not able to join us. He's going to try and join by phone, but he's en route to Alberta. So he has a little video clip to introduce himself.
Yeah, my name is Niall Schofield. I'm a motivational speaker for FASD and other topics. I've been involved with the network for roughly 5 years, and now I'm working at the FASD network in Saskatoon. I am the housing director, so I'm happy to be here, and I'm looking forward to presenting a message today. Yeah, my name.
I'm going to test my technology skills today.
Yeah, my name is Niall.
How do I go to the next slide? Here we are. Okay.
I think it's really important to emphasize that although the four of us are presenting today, we're not doing this independently. We really believe in and have a strong team in CanFASD that includes researchers, the Family Advisory Committee, which are all caregivers from across Canada that provide support and care for individuals with FASD, and our adult FASD expert collaboration team, which are adults with FASD. So we think it's really important to really include all voices of people living with FASD and working in the area of FASD in our research. So I'm gonna turn it over to Katy now, and she's gonna give us an overview of the presentation and then go into some of the research on FASD.
Thanks, Dorothy. Awesome, thank you. So just a quick overview to kind of know what you are in for the next hour or so. I want to spend a little bit of time right at the beginning, sort of setting the stage around what we're talking about when we discuss strengths-based approaches and strengths-based research, and why it matters to be having this conversation and discussing this topic. Then I'm going to dive in just snippets of a few different research studies that we have been a part of in the last couple of years, as well as some more emerging evidence in the last 2 years. A couple of studies have been published that I thought folks would be interested in hearing about. And then throughout the conversation, we're really hoping to weave in that lived experience voice. And that's why I'm so honored and privileged and grateful to have Dorothy and Lauren and Niall sort of peppered in there with his videos, sharing their story, because I think that the most important part of my job as a researcher is to make that bridge between what we do in the lab and on our computers with the people who we care about and we're doing this work for. And so having that nice bridge and partnership with the Family Advisory Committee and the AFEC team helps us to have really meaningful conversations about why we're doing this. So with that, I will warn you that I always overestimate what I want to say. I have a lot of things to say because I'm quite passionate about this area. So I'm going to speed through some studies fairly quickly. And I just invite anybody, if they would like to have any questions or comments in the box. I'm also happy to answer questions later. You'll have my email address, but I just wanted to give snippets of a few conceptual areas and parts of the literature that I think are relevant to our conversation today. So first, why are we talking about this? Why do we care about changing the narrative around FASD? So kind of backing up a little bit, predominantly in the FASD field in the last 40 or so years, there's been a real focus on the deficits and the challenges and the difficulties that come with living with FASD. And this isn't inherently a bad thing. It's been helpful for identifying needs and advocating for resources and informing policy. But the problem with a deficits only focus is that we're focusing only on fixing problems, remediating deficits, and reducing risk. And that's the end of the conversation. So when that's all we're talking about, what we do to families and individuals who are living with FASD is we really increase the stigma around the disability when we're only talking about the negative parts of it. We can really perpetuate a sense of shame and hopelessness in folks with FASD and their families. People with disabilities who aren't aware of their strengths and their successes and aren't able to talk about them, it really undermines their self-concept. And there's also a sense of disempowerment that comes with this. So one of the conversations that we have with caregivers often is that because FASD is framed as too difficult or too complex, this results in a pretty significant service barrier, because service providers think, I'm too afraid, I'm not equipped to help, I'm not equipped to support people with FASD and their families, so I'm just going to leave it. And so the problem with that is that there's a huge service gap, and then people who need support aren't getting it. And so I don't want to say that we want to ignore the challenges and the deficits, because I think it's very important to acknowledge and validate the challenges and the needs of people with FASD and their families. But what we are here to support, the idea that we want to support, is that we really need to find a balance between acknowledging and validating the difficulties and identifying and celebrating the strengths of people with FASD. So at the other end of the spectrum is a strengths-based lens. And this is very different from a deficit-focused model, because here it's very much person-centered way of thinking about people. And so when we're thinking from a strengths-based perspective, we are rooting ourselves in positive psychology, where it's a very person-centered, whole person view of an individual. And rather than focusing only on fixing problems and remediating deficit, we're focusing on how do we provide opportunities and how do we identify abilities and talents and strengths in order to promote a person's well-being and quality of life. So in this sense, we're really looking at opportunity and potential. We're also really focused on being a partner with people who we're actually talking about. So rather than making goals and treatment plans based on what we think is best, the point of a strengths-based model is to really have the individual be an active participant in the decisions and the goal setting in their life. And when we do this, it's much more empowering, and it's much more hopeful and holistic way of looking at people with disabilities. So one important thing that I have learned in the last few years when I've been thinking about strengths-based approaches is that strength is more than an absence of weakness. So we can talk about relative strengths or relative weaknesses, and that's an important conversation. And I'll even be talking about a study later on that area. But I think that one of the things that I've really taken away is that we're not only looking at the absence of challenge, we're looking at thriving. We're not just looking at surviving. We're looking at the extra. We're looking at what more opportunities and what more strengths can we build on beyond just the absence of a challenge. And so one definition that I have found helpful when I'm conceptualizing what we mean by a strengths-based paradigm, basically it's just giving us a different language to frame a person and their experiences and their difficulties. So rather than just focusing on problems and challenges, we're focusing on solutions and hope and creating opportunities to promote well-being and quality of life. So this is a fairly dense slide, and I won't go into all of these studies, but this is just kind of some of the impacts and the outcomes that have been shown in the literature to arise when we take strengths-based approaches, when we work with people with disabilities. So as you can see, and this is in different settings, and it's not specific to FASD, but it's just disability in general. When we promote strengths-based conversations, and when we do strengths-based work, these are all the potential impacts and outcomes that we can see, which is clearly worth it if you look at this. Now, that is the broad conversation around strengths-based lenses, and then I wanted to dive into a little bit more specifics around the research in the FASD world. So back probably 5 or so years ago, I think Dorothy, never remember where this conversation started. I think Dorothy and I were talking about, and Kelly maybe was talking about, we talk about strengths-based approaches all the time. We talk about it all the time. But what's actually being done in the literature? Is there actually any research and any evidence that researchers are producing that helps us understand more about the strengths in people with FASD? And so, of course, as researchers, we decided, let's do a lit review. So what we did is we've reviewed all the literature that has ever been published in FASD to identify what's the state of the strengths-based literature. How many studies are there? What participants are engaged in this research? What are researchers finding? And then our second research question was, what are the strengths that are being identified? So the way that we operationalized strengths in our paper was talents, abilities, and characteristics that can be leveraged to promote fulfillment and well-being in the life of people with FASD. So we wanted to know both what's out there, how many studies are there, and what settings do they take place in, and then what are researchers finding? So what we found was that there were only 19 studies of all the FASD papers that has ever been published. There were only 19 studies where researchers shared evidence explicitly on strengths. And so for the most part, these studies were of lived experiences, so a lot of qualitative research where researchers interviewed adolescents, adults, and their caregivers around life experiences. And so generally, most of the studies took place in educational settings, employment settings, and justice settings. So that's kind of the snapshot of what the literature was at the time. And some really important findings that we came up with when we were reviewing and synthesizing these 19 studies is that more often than not, when researchers were discussing strengths in their findings, it was tangential, and it was kind of an offshoot or a sidebar of a conversation that was much more predominantly focused on challenges and stressors and barriers. So it was like, 80 or 90% of the paper was about the difficulties. And oh, by the way, there were a couple of these extra strengths that were identified on the side. So largely the conversation still was deficit focused, even though there was some data on strengths that we thought was important to pull out. So as I said, these strengths were set in the context of the greater challenges. Two, oftentimes the ways in which strengths were being described was very tokenistic. Sorry, getting over a cold. It was using really soft language. So things like my child with FASD is very spunky, or my partner with FASD is very sweet. So, which is great. I'm not trying to minimize that, but it's not really leverageable. It's hard to build on spunky, or even really hard to define and measure. So what we're finding really is that few of the studies were actually intentionally rooted in strengths-based approaches using tools that were designed to identify strengths. It was much more kind of unintentional offshoot. But all that said, as I totally criticize the literature, we were able to pull out some really important findings around what folks are reporting around strengths in people with FASD. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we were looking at talents, abilities, and characteristics. So talents and abilities are more things that people can practice, and skills that can be grown and nurtured. Whereas characteristics are more like parts of a person's personality. So these are some of the talents and abilities that were identified in the literature. And I don't know about everybody else, but for me, anecdotally, this is definitely what I have heard in the past. That folks with FASD really excel in creativity and athletics and visuals, computers. So this validated for me my own anecdotal or clinical experiences around what I have seen in the past. So that was it was just interesting to see that this is also showing up in the empirical literature. And then we also looked at character strengths. And so, as I said, these are more parts of a person's personality that you're kind of born with and just stick with you for the duration of your life. And these are more inherent, just parts of who you are as a human being. So some of the character strengths that we identified in this research when we synthesized all the data and all the findings was that people with FASD tended to be quite self-aware, particularly the older adolescents and adults, around being able to see and understand and acknowledge their limitations as well as their strengths and skills and talents. And an interesting thing that I really took away from, and it was inspired by in one of the papers, was that some of the adults with FASD were talking about their strengths and how they saw FASD as part of who they were, as part of their identity, and as a gift. So it wasn't framed as this deficit or this just inherent kind of flaw. It was framed and understood in terms of somebody's self-concept as a real gift and a real something that made a person who he was. So right. So the other character strengths were people with FASD were often reported to be open to receiving support from friends and family, which in later adolescence, early adulthood was needed to be balanced with interdependence. As individuals were transitioning to adulthood, there was that balance between receiving support and being open, and also trying to exert independence and autonomy as you do when you become an adult. And then human connection, of course, this is something that I hear all the time, is everybody with FASD is so friendly and caring and lovely conversationalists. And so this is coming up in literature as well. And then resilience and perseverance, determination, and then hope, optimism, and being able to see a future that is bright and that is positive and that has opportunities for success. So that was what we found in our literature review. So what had already been published prior to 2019, I think it was. And since then, there have been 2 or 3 studies that were published that were focused on strengths. And I wanted to just quickly run over what the researchers have reported on in these areas. So the one recent study was looking at resilience, and this is a study out of the U of A in Alberta. In this study, they were looking at resilience resources in youth and young adults with FASD. So they were looking at 3 different kinds of resilience. Relational resilience, which is supportive relationships and interpersonal connections that can support a person's resilience. Contextual resilience, which is being connected to a supportive community or a religious or a spiritual community. And then individual resilience is skills, personal skills and social skills that an individual has as an individual. And so what these researchers found was that in general, they spoke to youth as well as their caregivers, and youth generally rated themselves as higher across all areas of resilience than their caregivers did. But both the youth and the caregivers rated their relational resilience as being an area of strength. And so in particular, having those close relationships and those close connections, feeling safe and nurtured and supported, and having the capacity for caregiver attachment and being that strong relational resilient person was what stuck out as an area of strength in this study. And then interestingly, the researchers also looked at other factors that could help to promote resiliency. And so they looked at early life. So at what age were the individuals with FASD placed into a stable home, and when were they diagnosed? And they found both that early placement and early diagnosis was significantly related to higher relational and contextual resilience. And they also found that contextual and individual resilience were related to better functioning, current functioning. So youth who were scored higher on contextual and individual resilience had better adaptive functioning and lower mental health symptoms. So their social and their emotional functioning was better. So this is just a like roundabout way of saying early stable caregiving environment, as we know, is very supportive and very positive and very protective for developing strengths in people with FASD. And when we can focus on resilience, this allows for intervention opportunities so that we can support adaptive and mental health functioning. The next study, I'll try and be quick because I realize that I'm rambling a little bit. The next study is a cognitive study. So this is another review paper, and it's actually from the same team at the U of A, Jackie Pye and Carmen and Katrina and some other of our colleagues. They looked at all the literature that's been published in children with FASD to see what has been reported on their cognitive profile. And so what they found essentially was that it was highly variable. There's no one unequivocal area of strength or difficulty that children are showing up in the literature. However, generally, children are reported to have higher visual nonverbal skills than verbal skills across learning and memory tasks. And then another significant finding was that children were reported to do better on tasks where there was actually strategies embedded right within the task. So say memory strategies or chunking strategies or any kind of strategies that helped individuals to access the cognitive strengths that they have was an area of where children were excelling. And then finally, areas where or tasks that required less demand, so a little bit more simple, straightforward tasks rather than the complex tasks, seemed to be an area of relative strength for children with FASD. And I pulled this quote from that paper because I really liked how these researchers framed what they're trying to do with this paper. And I thought that I would share that as just a nice way of thinking about how we can change the narrative. So really just treating people with FASD as whole people, as we all are, and people who have difficulties and people who have strengths and people who struggle and people who succeed, and we're all just human beings, and it's important to remember that. So finally, I love this study. This is a study that was done in the University of Rochester, and the team here looked at the caregiver reported strengths and positive influences that children with FASD have in their families. And so it was 30 caregivers who were reporting on their kids. Sorry, I have a cough. And so these are some of the strengths that caregivers were identifying through both questionnaires and interviews. So in terms of social motivation, this really aligns with what we found in our lit review around how children with FASD are often reported to be really loving and affectionate, funny, helpful, generous, and really interpersonally engaging. So that relational strength keeps coming up. Another strength that was identified was children having positive effort and persistence. And again, this is similar to what we found in the lit review around people with FASD being extremely resilient and being able to overcome adversity and challenges. And then some aptitudes and skills that were identified in the study were things like athleticism, creativity, art, and intelligence. So those were some of the specific skills that were identified as strengths. And then finally, mood and personality. So children were often described as being curious and happy and having a love and a joy in life. So this is some of the ways that caregivers were describing their children. And then the researchers also asked parents to describe what positive influences their children have in their family. And so this is my favorite part of the study. I think it's such a meaningful, practical, relevant research question is how does your child with FASD positively influence your family? And this is just the kind of research that I love to see. So they found that caregivers talked about the tangible contributions that their children provided in their family, things like helping with chores and helping with housework and helping the family kind of run. And then they talked a lot about their own personal growth. So being able to think outside the box and challenge themselves to learn new types of skills that are better suited for parenting a child with FASD. They reported that as a really significant positive influence as well. And then they talked about children really contributing to a sense of cohesiveness or togetherness in the family unit, and how the children with FASD made the families feel more complete. And then finally, the emotional contribution is kind of around how, as I mentioned before, children are really affectionate and how they just provide such a joy and a sense of happiness into the home that all family members benefit from. They also looked to see whether the strengths that they identified in this study actually related to the child or the parent functioning. And they found that when children had higher strengths, or when caregivers rated their child as having more strengths, their child was better at emotional regulation and had fewer problem behaviors. And the caregiver had higher levels of parenting satisfaction and lower levels of parenting stress. And so you can see that kind of indirectly, when we focus on strengths and we think about them and we try and identify them and help manifest them in our lives, it really does impact both the child and the parent and the rest of the family unit. So that was the fastest overview of the strengths-based literature that I could possibly give. But I wanted to just mention at this point, before we share some more of what we're currently doing ourselves at the network, is the way that we're doing research at the network, and me in particular, I've really been looking for opportunities to engage in more participatory research. And so we've talked a few times already today about how much more meaningful and relevant and important research is when it's participatory. So that means that when we're doing participatory research, we are equal partners in the research process with the people who we are doing the research about. So the people who are directly impacted by the research are equally valued members of the research team. So and that's genuine. That's not just like the tokenistic stuff that we were talking about earlier. Like it's where folks with, say in our case, folks with FASD help design research questions and understand how we're going to collect information and how we want to present this stuff. So it's like it's a true, genuine collaboration between academic researchers and people with lived experience. So this is really important method of research that I'm particularly engaged in right now, and I think helps us to create evidence that is impactful and really important, and that gets into the lives of the people who need it the most. So with that, we were hoping that Lauren and Niall and Dorothy could share a little bit about what their experiences have been like in terms of being on a research team, given that we have been doing a lot of participatory research lately. And so I did record a video of Niall. Lauren, do you want me to play that one first before you go? Okay, so I'll play what Niall said about his experiences being part of the research team.
So basically, after getting involved with the network, I kind of just stayed using the facilities and so forth. It's been a really interesting direction in my life. It's actually added great value and understanding to my complicated brain. Being a part of the research or being asked to be a part of the research that the researchers and doctors are evolving, it's actually a great honor to be able to contribute being lived experience. Yeah, it's been a really positive experience for me, and I look forward to many more projects. So,
Sorry. Okay. Lauren, did you want to share?
So I can echo what Niall is saying. It is very important that I am involved with the research team, with a research team here in CanFASD and with other agencies, just because it gives me a sense of purpose, it gives me a sense of hope, it gives me a sense of that I'm contributing to society in hopefully a positive way. It also, I know, brings a sense of belonging to not only myself, but anybody who has this condition as well. It gives us hope for the future, and it gives us, allows us to project our voice and feel important, I guess, in society. And it gives us a sense of belonging, and it can contribute to our overall well-being as an individual. Research is a great way to kind of show others that we can do things and that our voice matters. And yeah, that's basically what I find, that research is a positive thing.
Thanks, Lauren. I think from my experience as a caregiver, I think it's, just to go back, I think it's really interesting that Niall and Lauren have both talked about what they gain from being involved in research, but they didn't talk about how much research gains from their involvement. And I think that's really important. And I think in my experience as a caregiver, I was often very frustrated with the amount of research that was being done on things that really wouldn't make, or at least in the short term, wouldn't make any significant difference in my life. It wouldn't make, our family life any easier. It wouldn't give me strategies on what to do and how to deal with certain situations. So I think after getting involved with CanFASD and the research network, I was able to have a voice in terms of the kind of research that caregivers really think are important. And I was really impressed with how receptive and how open the researchers were to that input. I initially thought, well, they're not gonna, we often feel like nobody wants to hear from us. They hear from us too much. They don't want to hear from us anymore. But the researchers were very, very open. And I think because of that collaboration that we have with researchers who have the expertise to answer the questions that we have, with caregivers being involved in trying to set priorities for FASD research, particularly intervention research, and with incorporating the people with lived experience, the research has just gotten that much better and that much more applicable to our day-to-day lives. I think the real value of having people with FASD on the team is that they know how to approach other people with FASD much better than I do, or much better than Katy does. They have a shared language that they can share with us. I think that there's a lot of real benefits, and I think there's some challenges that come with doing collaborative research too. And that's, Katy talked about having to share that responsibility and share that power. And sometimes for researchers that might be a challenge, but I think it's been really effective in CanFASD, and I think you can see it in the quality of the research that's coming out now. Thanks, Katy. So what we wanted to do now is just to talk a little bit about some of the current projects that we have. The first one that I want to talk about is the CARE study, which is a caregiver approaches resilience and experience in raising individuals with FASD. It's a long title that sort of got into a nice little acronym. But we had long talked about the research, again, the research on caregivers experience in FASD was always based on deficits. It was caregiver stress, caregiver burnout, and didn't give voice to some of the positive experiences we had as caregivers in terms of, you know, the resilience that we develop, the learning that we have, and that kind of thing. So we decided that we wanted to do a caregiver study. The other factor that came into that decision too is that as caregivers, we were going to the researchers and saying, we want to know about this. We want to know about this. Like, for example, we want to know about the experience of grandparents raising their children with FASD, or their grandchildren with or without FASD, because that's pretty common in the caregiver community for people with FASD to be raising their grandchildren. Well, what's their experience? We want to know about different alternative therapies with people with FASD. Are those effective? And we go to the researchers and they'd say, well, there's nothing in that area. There's no research that's been done there. And we'd say to them, well, can you do some research? And they'd say, well, we have to get funding to be able to do the research. And, you know, sometimes to get funding, it's a little bit easier if there's some evidence that you can give that this is an issue. So the funding sources will want to fund that kind of research, because the funding for research is very, very competitive in Canada. And there's nothing there. So we developed a caregiver study that really looks at the many aspects of caregivers' experience, their concerns, family functioning, the need for support, to really start to develop that basis of information in a variety of areas that can help us know what else we need to look at, to be able to substantiate our research questions, to build grants and future studies, and to help us tailor supports and services. And then to develop some resources and knowledge translation tools to be able to pass that on. So it's a very comprehensive survey. It takes almost a couple of hours to complete. It goes through a variety of different areas in caregivers' experience. It can be broken down so that you only have to do a section at a time. And after each section, we wanted to give something back to caregivers. So we incorporated things like kind of it might be a relaxation technique, or something positive, something that can help a caregiver manage some of the emotions that can come up from doing a survey like this. So far we've had approximately 200 people that have initiated the survey. There's about 85 that are complete. 96% of the people that have completed the survey are women, which means not a lot of men are completing the survey. 64% are from Canada. They have other countries: Australia, New Zealand, Europe, Pakistan, Mexico, Costa Rica, people from those areas answering the survey as well. And in terms of their parenting role, about 13% are biological parents, 5% are foster parents, and 5% are other family members. So the majority is adopted parents. So we'd really like to see a bit broader representation. We'd really encourage men to do the survey. The survey is open and available on the CanFASD webpage. In terms of, and we also very specifically asked about strengths and successes. So we did ask the questions about family dynamics, well-being, caregiving experience, but we wanted to highlight strengths and successes in the survey too. So I'm just going to go through some of the quotes that we received. When we asked about what the greatest social strength of your child or adult with FASD is, some of the responses we got are they're hardworking, friendly, generous, great storytellers, well-liked, helpful, brave and courageous, empathetic, and perseverant. They persevere in many challenging situations. One person said, my child has the biggest heart, loves being a part of a community once he's accommodated. He has compassion, especially for younger people, and can adjust to their level and needs. My child is loyal to any person he can make friends with. He likes to make people laugh. He has a huge heart and compassion for people. We asked about what makes you most excited about your future with your loved ones with FASD, and some of the responses we got were being able to overcome exceptions and lead a great life in spite of FASD diagnosis. His curiosity of all things that he's passionate about, and the sky is the limit attitude. I'm excited by finding her joy, seeing her grow in confidence, self-acceptance, and love of life. I'm excited for the adventures that lie ahead. I can't wait to see how he uses his creativity and wit to make a life. For all my fears for him, he is one of the most resilient and persistent people I have ever met. When we asked about what gives you hope for the future, one response said, every day she surprises me with another strength. She's wanting to show people that even if you have FASD, you are still important and able to be part of society. Another one said that he's starting to see himself as successful and someone who has strengths. That they have hopes and dreams that they want to accomplish. I think she will grow into exactly who she's meant to be, which is a pretty great person. Her capacity for joy is vast, and I trust this will carry her forward. So one of the things that we learned from that, and another part of the survey was getting caregivers to put in their words of wisdom about what they found to be particularly effective. But one of the things that I think we've learned from the work that we've done in terms of strengths research is that you just have to ask the question. So much of the research never asked what strengths were in people with FASD. But when you ask that question, whether it's in research or whether it's in your private practice or whether it's in your policy development, if you ask what the strengths are, you're going to get information on that. And then you can take that information to use it to make the services, the support much, much better. You can leverage those strengths to be able to assist the individual. So I'm going to just turn it back to Katy now to talk about another study that we're engaged in, which is strengths in adults with FASD.
Thanks, Dorothy. So this study here that I'm going to share a little bit about was inspired by the lit review that we did a couple of years ago, where we found that very little research is out there where researchers explicitly, intentionally were looking at strengths. And so we said, let's just do our own study. So given that we have this amazing team of adults with FASD as well as caregivers, we thought this would be such a wonderful opportunity to actually walk the talk and do a study, a collaborative partner study, where we design the study, we come up with research questions, we decide how we're going to answer the research questions in collaboration with people with lived experience. So for this study, our research questions are around strengths and identity in adults with FASD, and we want to know also how strengths and identity impact well-being for adults with FASD. So this study is it's an online survey primarily, but we also gave the option of responding creatively. So as I mentioned earlier a few times, that oftentimes people with FASD really excel in visual expression. And so we have the option for a person to submit artwork if they choose to express themselves that way. So they can do either the survey and or the art contribution. And so we thought that would be a nice, a more inclusive way of capturing the voices and the stories of adults with FASD in a meaningful way. So we're still collecting data, just like the CARE study. We launched this study actually last FASD Day on September 9th, and we're still going to collect data for another few months. So both the CARE study and the strength study are open right now for recruitment if you or anyone you know or work with would be interested in participating. So we're still analyzing, but as of right now, in our strengths with adults with FASD study, we have 37 people who have responded. On average, those people who have responded are about 36 years old, but they range in age from 20 to 63. Again, it seems like people who identify as women are more keen to do online surveys. It's about 68% of participants are women. And also similarly, about 60% are from Canada. So both of these studies are international. So anybody who has an internet connection can participate. So they're primarily from Canada in this study as well, but we're pleased so far to have the responses that we have had. So in addition to those questionnaires, we also ask open-ended questions around things like, what do we ask? Who am I? What do you want people to know about you? What do you like most about yourself? And what does success look like for you? And so these are some of the quotes that are coming out of the study. Same thing, same questions. So this is some of the artwork that participants contributed. And we ask participants when they send in their artwork to tell us in their words what it means to them. So this one person sent in a drawing of an eagle and said that even though things get tough, she raises and flies like the eagle in life. Just very inspiring. And this gorgeous, gorgeous photograph. This is a picture I did in school. It describes who I am, and I love helping people. Again, it's kind of this on the same theme of that relational resilience and the relational strengths that we can really draw on and focus on and leverage. So that's just a quick snippet of the findings that we have been seeing coming out of the strengths survey. We then now wanted to spend some time weaving in that lived experience and really talking about how some of these strengths in real life have been identified and have contributed to success for people with FASD. Dorothy, did you want to say anything about this?
I could say something better if I'm unmuted. I think this is what we wanted to do, is just give an example of what it's been like in real life, and just emphasize the fact that everybody is unique. Everybody, particularly everybody with FASD, is unique with their own unique strengths and their own unique challenges. And by focusing on strengths, we can help leverage some of the challenges. So we wanted Niall and Lauren to really have a chance to talk about what their experience has been and how they've used their strengths to not only change and help their lives, but to change and help the lives of other people, because we often don't recognize the contribution that people with FASD make and their commitment to making the world a better place, not only for themselves, but for others as well. So we'll go on to a clip that Niall did first.
So I'm gonna start with shining some light on some positive
That's
things
better.
to be able to accomplish in my life. After receiving some help on and refocusing on my strengths, there used to be a huge stigma on people with FASD. We were looked upon as violent and angry people, and there was just a really bad reputation, and hence why nobody wants to really admit that they have or they're suffered or they've been affected by FASD. And that goes all the way back from caregivers to people who are on the spectrum and people who have to walk with so-called shame. It's another opportunity for me to share my story, to inspire people, or to inspire the lead towards changing the narrative on people with FASD. As a young child, I was involved in a sport where I excelled at. It's BMX racing. And I raced after when I was about 7, and from 7 to 9 to 11 to 14 to 16 to 19, my BMX career was always something that I found value in and I enjoyed, and that I was able to excel at. After going through some back surgeries due to car accidents, I was laid off on the sport of BMX at 19. I was with not the elites, but I was with like the faster crew, the older crew. And we were able to travel to different provinces and collect points and just really have a lot of fun and build what's called the BMX family. When I got diagnosed at 39, So it talks to you about some of the things you're strong at, some of the things you're weak at, some of the things you struggle with, and having that test and the knowledge to shape or reshape your self-being, your being, right? So, you know, I was able to focus on my strengths, and some of the strengths that I have, that I was told by the doctor, was he said, Niall, you're extremely weak at reading. Yeah, I got like a grade 3 reading level. But he said one of your strengths are that you're a great problem solver. And so when I was given that information, an opportunity arose in the city of Warman. I saw the city had put like a bike trail together. It was like a mountain bike kind of trail, and it wasn't specifically a BMX track, but I saw a vision, and the vision was to transform that track into a BMX track, like an official BMX track. And so I put myself up on, is voted for presidency. As the previous president stepped down, I stepped in. And I kind of just, you know, with all my knowledge of all the years of BMX that I participated in and was involved with, I took all of that knowledge and I started to formulate the vision. And the vision was to have the best BMX track in the province of Saskatchewan, to build the best training facility for the youth, for the community, and to educate the community of Warman in the sport of BMX. And, you know, some of you might be saying like, oh man, that's a lot of stuff. It doesn't even end there. It gets way more complicated. When you talk about opening up a nonprofit, when you talk about building a board, when you talk about, you know, hiring the right people on the board so you can complete the vision. When you think about the $1.6 million that I had to raise in 4 years to accomplish these goals, things get very complicated. And that's something that I set the bar way up here, and I was able to achieve by hyper focusing my energy and using the strengths that I have as a person with FASD. I have some weaknesses and I have some really strong strengths. So when I'm talking to sponsorships to raise money for the club as the president, the job is to build the funding for the club's sustainability. Our ridership went from 27 members to 157 members in 4 years. I was able to accomplish the first paved corners, the asphalt corners on the track. That was another goal that was achieved. First track to do it in Saskatchewan history. First track to have a team, like a team of 10 riders with elite riders. First team in Canada. I mean, in the province of Saskatchewan. I was able to build the first ever real true potential track. Like it was built by an Olympian out of New Zealand. His name is Trent Jones. And he came in with the small little community of Warman, built this amazing world-class track. And so these are the type of accomplishments that I've been able to achieve. And it's been just a remarkable ride because, you know, nobody's ever done it in the province of Saskatchewan in all of the years of existence. And that's a really proud moment for me to show that my work and my efforts and my what do you call it? You call it aspiration.
Yeah,
passion has built something very unique in the city of Warman, and now I'm looking at building other tracks, just kind of duplicating what I did in Warman, to build 16 other tracks in the province of Saskatchewan, which I have 8 potentials right now in various spots. Part with this knowledge, I'm also have my eye on an indoor triple discipline indoor facility, road, mountain bike, and BMX. It'll be the first time anybody in Canada has ever achieved anything that huge. It's a $100 million project. And I've got a lot of great people working with me. I've got a lot of great people who believe in me. And I'm just a guy who struggles and overcomes a lot. I overcome and problem solve every day. You wake up with new problems and you find your way through it, and you find people to believe in you and support you and mentor you and give you advice and help you and believe in you. It's a really unique feeling when you grow up with doubts and I'm not this and I'm this and that and that. To change that over to believe in faith and just really humbling experience. And I'm glad to be here to share that story with you. And I think the last accomplishment that I had with the track was we hosted what's called the Canada Cup. Now, the Canada Cup BMX race is when all of the elite riders, like the best riders all in Canada, they all come to one track for a points race. And there's 8 races in different areas of Canada. I hosted the first ever Canada Cup in Saskatchewan history. I also hosted the first national event in Warman history. So the city that I live in Warman, it's generally football, hockey, soccer, dance, whatever. The first person to bring a national event to the city of Warman was myself and my vision. And it's I had a great team behind me, and you can't do it without people working behind you, but to have the faith of the Canada Cycling Association believe that I was capable in hosting that event. And the beautiful thing about it was after the event, when we took all the higher ups of the Canada Cup to the, we filmed it live. So we have a company called Bamboo Productions, and the trailer was 75 feet, and it had all the interesting, like the TV cameras in there and all the switchboards, and they were switching angles and cameras and all that stuff. And the higher up, Josh at the Canada Cycling, he comes into this trailer. He's like, "Oh, I have never seen this ever in Canada, like in a Canada Cup history." So just to show that you were able to even raise the bar even more of their own standards, because Canada Cup is a standard, and they'll express it to you, but I kind of went above and beyond. And that sponsorship was $85,000 for a company to believe in something that you're trying to do or trying to accomplish, and to take part in that. I mean, that's massive, and only going to get bigger from here. So
yes.
I just wanted to share that with you guys. It's probably one of my bigger accomplishments, and yeah, I just hope that maybe it inspires somebody out there.
I think Niall's story is a great example of how things like creativity and perseverance and problem solving as strengths can lead to amazing results. And I think he focused and at one point he mentioned how important it was for that doctor to tell him and to acknowledge how good of a problem solver he was, because that changed Niall's perspective and gave him the confidence and said, yeah, I am a really good problem solver. So yeah, I can take on this big project, and every day I can problem solve and I can be successful. So I think it's a great example of people with FASD needing to hear from other people what their strengths are, as well as acknowledging themselves. I'm going to turn it over to Lauren now, who can talk about what some of her strengths are and how she's used them.
I don't know how to compete with any of that. Oh my goodness, where do I even begin? Holy crap. Okay, so I was diagnosed at the age of 27 with this condition. Since then, I've had a very supportive family. My family has really embraced this diagnosis with me and walked along my journey with me, and really supported me not only financially in my dreams. I realized that my biggest strength is actually my brain, because it's allowed me to kind of dream really big, like Niall. Some of the accomplishments that I've done since 2019, when I really came full force out of the gate with this disability, or acknowledging my differences, was back in 2019 when I took it upon myself to raise awareness with the BC bus transit link service here in British Columbia, and I teamed up with them and I raised awareness with them to create billboard ads or bus ads that would go on the outside of the buses here in Victoria, and those ads stayed up. I created the ads, and then those ads stayed up on the buses for about a year. They ran all over the city and all over the city of Victoria. The next year, I dreamed even bigger. I went back to the drawing board and I dreamed even bigger. And I went and I talked to an agency called the Pattison Billboard Company. And from there, I sat down with their creative team and I told them my disability. I told them I wanted to raise awareness. And so they created, with myself, billboard ads that went up along the highway stretch here in Victoria. And those stayed up for about a month and a half. They went up in the middle of August and they ran all the way through September, because September is Fetal Alcohol Awareness Month, as we all know. Then the next year, I went back to the drawing board, and I thought, what can I do this year? Every year I try to outdo myself. I realize that it's just something that I do. So last year I went and I approached a radio station that did a advertisement that ran an ad on their radio station for about a month and a half as well. All of this stuff I've paid for doing GoFundMes. I started a lot of GoFundMes online, and family supported, and friends have supported it, and agencies have supported it, and certain things. So I've been able to run all these things. This year, I have also become a co-author on a paper on neurodiversity with Dorothy Reid here and others. Jacqueline Pye, I think, was on that one, Dorothy Reid and myself and other people. And so I became a co-author on neurodiversity paper. I also have this year, I always want to try to outdo myself again. So this year I've approached and I've stepped up to a really big CFL team here in BC, and I've approached them to bring awareness to the CFL platform. And so I've been working and talking with the BC Lions here, and hopefully we're going to be coming together to bring awareness at their stadium, hopefully in September, with hopefully bringing red shoes to the stadium and hopefully putting those on the cheerleaders and on the players. I'm working in the process of working with that with the team. I'm gonna probably be hopefully getting sensory boxes and kits together so that individuals can attend the game who have fetal alcohol. They already support the autism section of the autism sector of the world. So hopefully by bringing FASD into the mix, they'll be able to support both of our neurodiverse disabilities. So I've accomplished a bit, but maybe not. It's just different than Niall, but both very successful by, I guess, recognizing our strengths and working alongside our strengths and having the support from people who recognize our strengths, and having agencies like CanFASD embrace our strengths. And yeah, that's only some of what I've done. Stay tuned.
Thanks, Lauren. That's incredible. And I think, again, it's a really good example of being able to use some of the things you have, like your brain, your creativity, your connection, your social connections, to be able to accomplish things that a lot of people would say, oh, that's never going to happen. So that ability to not take no for an answer, and to persevere, and to get a group of people together to support an issue is quite amazing. So thanks for sharing that story, Lauren. So what we want to do now is just kind of tie things up. And I think some of the key messages that we really wanted to get across in this presentation is that FASD is unique. Everyone has their strengths and weaknesses. That applies not only to FASD, but to all of us. And we can do better. We can accomplish more when we use our strengths to help us deal with some of the challenges, or gather in the group of people that can bring in some of the strengths that we may not personally have. But I think it's really important for us as a group of people that are interested and care about FASD, care about the people that are living with FASD, to start to change that narrative. We have to challenge the stigma associated with FASD, because it's really stopping us from, it's stopping people from seeking the diagnosis. It's stopping agencies from trying to adapt their programs or to develop their services to accommodate people with FASD. So we have to challenge that stigma. There are harms. We believe that there's significant harms that are associated with the deficit focus, and that is really that sense of hopelessness and helplessness. As a caregiver, if all I hear about are the deficits associated with FASD and the challenges associated with being a caregiver and the stress that's associated with being a caregiver and the burnout that's associated with being a caregiver, it's not really encouraging me to go on and to try harder and to do better. And I need to be able to do that. I also need to be able to use the information that I have and have gained to be able to really advocate for the supports and services that my kids needed and other kids need. And if I go into an agency and they have this perception that, oh, FASD is just a brain-based disability with all these negative characteristics associated, well, we can't provide services. So it really can limit it. We also wanted to really kind of get the idea across that we have to work together. We need, in the field of FASD, we need to stop working in silos. We need everybody to work collaboratively, whether it be in research, whether it be in policy development, program development. Our work can be strengthened by incorporating all the voices of people associated with FASD. We need stronger connections across community to leverage the strengths and resources across Canada, because FASD can be very isolating, and we really need to change that, because it's really what we're doing that's paving the way for people with FASD in the future. So we thought maybe what we would do is say now, what can you do? This is some of the things that we need to do. How can you do that? Well, some of the suggestions that we have is that you can learn more about FASD. And one of the ways I have learned so much about FASD is by connecting with people that are not usually in my area, connecting with researchers, connecting with a variety of people that have different lived experience, connecting with service providers. So connect with others to learn about FASD from different perspectives. Challenge your perceptions. Challenge your perception as FASD is a deficit-based disorder. Challenge the idea that a person with FASD, that FASD becomes the defining characteristic of them. They are people and they have FASD. They are full people with strengths and challenges just as everybody else, but they are not defined by their disability. CanFASD has been involved in a bill in the Senate right now on a national strategy on FASD. Support the national strategy. Contact your MLA or your MP and say, you know, it's really important that we start to develop a national strategy in Canada so that everybody in Canada has equal access to diagnostic services and support services. Become a part of a research team from whatever perspective you have, whether you're a service provider or a person with lived experience or a policymaker. if you want to become involved in a research team, CanFASD has a lot of research teams in different areas: prevention, intervention, justice, child welfare. Just contact the executive director and say, hey, I want to be involved in research. Participate in research. I know sometimes it's a big ask to say, well, will you spend 2 hours doing a caregiver survey? We really need your information. But that kind of research is really important to do. So participate in research. Become a member of CanFASD. That's another thing that you can do. There are individual members. I know Manitoba is a member, but you can have individual memberships too. Which, by the way, will get you a reduced rate for the national conference coming up next November in Saskatoon. So now we just wanted to turn it over to you, questions and answers. What do you think you can do to change the narrative on FASD? And while you think about that, and type something in the chat or unmute and give your comments, Katy just put up some of the resources that are available on CanFASD to learn more about FASD. So from that, I'm just going to turn it over to question and answers.
Thank you so much. That was such a wonderful presentation, such incredibly powerful research and stories, and just such a wonderful session. So thank you very much for that. Before I just pass things over to you, Megan, for the questions, I just want to share for anyone who might have to hop off for other things in their afternoon, just to let you know that there will be a survey both to evaluate the session that will be sent out next week. We are also going to be sending out links for the caregiver and adult surveys that were mentioned during today's session. If that's something that you'd like to respond to or share with people who you think might be good folks to participate in those surveys. And just to let people know that our next session will be held on Friday, March 17th from 12 to 1:15. And the topic is how to support healthy sexual development and behaviors in children and youth with FASD. So that's, I just wanted to share quickly in case anyone has to go, but Megan, I'll just maybe defer to you to see. I know you've been keeping a close eye on the chat, and if anyone has other questions that aren't in the chat, you're welcome to pop them in or unmute yourself and ask away.
Well, then I'd just like to thank everybody for sticking with us and participating in it. And if Katy has put up our contact information, and please don't hesitate to reach out if there's any more information that you would like to have. It's been a pleasure and an honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you again, everybody. I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you back for our next session on March 17th. Take care, everyone.
Okay, thanks, everyone.